Jean-Claude Van Damme balanced between two moving trucks. Perfect control, perfect calm. Off camera, balance snapped. The schedules, the headlines, the habits he couldn't outrun, contracts dried up, friends worried. He had to rebuild from the inside out before the world believed. Again. Before we dive in, tap subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay to the end for the on-screen moment that flipped his story from finished to forgiven. He began as Jean-Claude Van Varenberg in a quiet corner of Brussels, a slender kid whose thick glasses arrived in the room before his confidence did. Attention found him for the wrong reasons. He didn't argue with it. He outworked it. If he couldn't change the room, he'd change the person walking into it. Karate was the first rewrite. Shotokan gave him a rule book that didn't flinch. Stance before speed, breath before blast. Kihon turned awkward motion into clean lines. Kata slowed him down until patience felt natural. Kumite made consequences immediate. On Belgium's national team, he learned to live inside that half second, where nerves die and timing wins. Progress stopped being a mood. It became a measurement. Then he made the choice that flipped expectations. Ballet. 5 uncompromising years at the barre forged what raw strength can't: alignment, control, economy. He learned to stack joints instead of muscling through, to hide strain, to land softly without leaking force. The jumps taught him to fall upward before gravity took him back. The holds taught him to make stillness read as intent. Years later, when his kicks seemed to hang before they snapped, it wasn't magic. It was balance doing the work. He layered bodybuilding onto that foundation. Iron added architecture, mirrors added honesty. Symmetry mattered more than size, presentation as much as power. Posing drilled angles and presence, the quiet skill of telling a story with posture. Mr. Belgium, 1978 wasn't a coronation, it was a receipt. The process was real. Routine hardened into ritual. Early alarms before doubt woke up. Long stretches to lengthen the line. Isometrics to armor the joints. Slow negatives to make fast positives possible. He tracked the boring parts: reps, meals, sleep, soreness, because compounding only works when you show up again tomorrow. The lens shifted from apology to aim. Movement became a language the camera would later love. Karate mechanics, ballet balance, bodybuilding silhouette, power that photographs as grace. Even at rest, he carried the quiet of someone who has rehearsed control until it feels like temperament. He stayed naturally reserved, more watcher than talker. But a watcher with a system is dangerous. He treated embarrassment as data, not destiny. Watch, adjust, repeat. The classmates who used to joke started asking about splits and stretching. The mirror that once accused began agreeing. Under the skin, 2 machines clicked into sync. The engine was capacity, lungs, legs, tolerance for grind. The chassis was form, posture, lines, the clean path force takes from hip to target. Together, they produced a signature you can spot in a single frame. A kick that starts on balance, travels on breath, and finishes on time. Not louder, cleaner, not wilder, truer. He understood something most people never learn. Confidence isn't volume, it's repeatability. He didn't need a pep talk. He needed another rep. The kid who once hid behind lenses now hid behind nothing. He carried proof. What he didn't have yet was scale. Brussels could measure effort. It couldn't magnify it. The rooms were small, the ceilings low, the stakes familiar. To find out whether the armor held under brighter light and harder doors, he would need a stage where talent is tested by things that have nothing to do with talent. Accents, hunger, slammed phones, rooms that laugh first and listen later. So he kept sharpening the only argument that translates anywhere. Excellence that repeats until it can't be ignored. He landed at LAX with a duffel, a phone number scribbled on paper, and a promise he kept repeating in the silence between bus stops. The city didn't answer. Rent wanted cash, English wanted tempo he didn't have yet. Nights shrank to the back seat, knees tucked, jacket thin, window fogged by his own breath. The stomach ache was constant. The goal was louder. Work came in fragments. Pizza boxes in the passenger seat. Parquet floors laid board by board until his wrists hummed. A chauffeur's cap in a borrowed sedan for people who lived inside the posters he taped above his mattress. Tips paid for protein. Time paid for everything else. Whenever a shift ended, he found a patch of concrete, folded into a split, and held the pain like a promise. Auditions were a loop. A smile for the splits, a wince for the vowels. He talked too fast to outrun the accent and end up tripping over it. We'll be in touch became a language of its own, polite, final, empty. He didn't negotiate with it. He trained, slept short, and tried again. Small flashes stitched a line, a background dance bit. Blink and you'd miss it. A stunt job, low money, high proof that he could hit the mark and take the hit. A cheap fight picture gave him an enemy's face and a first name. Not prestige, just screen time that read. He learned the lens like a coach, show clean angles, land on the beat, leave a finish the audience can feel from the back row. Then a door cracked, not because it was held for him, but because he shouldered it long enough. Bloodsport wasn't built to crown anybody. It crowned him anyway. The camera found what he'd built in private. Karate's timing, ballet's suspension, bodybuilding's silhouette. Kicks seemed to hover before they snapped. Impacts looked inevitable. People didn't just watch, they leaned forward. The budget was modest, the appetite wasn't. Momentum fell in behind him like a drumline. Kickboxer gave the crowd a ritual. Awkward dance, sudden violence, split that felt like punctuation. Lionheart turned the grit into a code. Double impact doubled the face, and proved the form could carry two attitudes. Universal Soldier set him across from a statue with a pulse. Timecop put his name above spectacle and let him play a man with stakes beyond the next punch. The kid who'd slept under a thin jacket now slept under a call sheet, with his name at the top. Outside the theaters, the culture filed him under icon without asking permission. Arcade kids picked the fighter in shades who split for emphasis because the swagger felt familiar. Bedroom walls got a new poster, lines sharp, hands relaxed, eyes set. He wasn't just doing action. He was setting a tempo. No wasted motion, clean power, finish in frame. He didn't treat applause like insurance. The rituals that saved him in Brussels, stretch, breathe, repeat, followed him into trailers lit by a star on the door. If a day ran long, the split still happened. If a flight ran late, the breathwork still did. Luck opens a door, preparation keeps you upright when the lights hit. He didn't plan to be surprised by success, he planned to survive it. Money changed how people shook his hand. It didn't change the math of pressure, schedules stacked, planes blurred into hotel rooms bled into sets. The work was louder now, the margins thinner. He had the thing he crossed an ocean to get and the bill for it. Miles, expectation, velocity was already printing. For a moment, though, the equation held: the body as instrument, the brand as balance, the audience as chorus. He'd forced the city to hear him without changing his voice, and the same control that made a split look like calm would need to hold, because momentum is a tide, and tides test everything that isn't anchored. At first, it felt like momentum. Then it felt like motion sickness. Cities blurred, call sheets stacked. He learned the trick every overbooked star learns: how to smile on fumes and make it look like composure. It worked until it didn't. Shortcuts arrived dressed as solutions. One line to take the edge off. One night to catch up. 1 week to reset. The needle on the dashboard drifted from green to red so slowly he could persuade himself it wasn't moving. The camera still got what it needed. The hours around the camera turned thin and noisy. He told himself it was just a phase, an athletic peak that demanded a little chemical help to hold. The problem with just is that it multiplies. Sleep came late and left early. Food was whatever fit between interviews. The ritual that once guarded him, stretch, breathe, repeat, faded into when I can. He could still split on command. He couldn't split his day between work and repair. Productions began to feel him before they saw him. Call times missed by minutes that turned into hours. A DS whispering into headsets. Producers checking bond paperwork. He could still give them the shot. They couldn't schedule the uncertainty. Precision was the brand. Unpredictability became the rumor. Tabloids don't need context. A photo outside a club, a caption with a name, a quote from someone who knows someone. By morning, it's a story. He later admitted one affair from that storm. The rest turned into a chorus that families can't unhear. Trust at home doesn't blow up, it erodes. So do calendars. Paperwork replaced handshakes. A contract dispute here. A stuntman's injury there. Settled with money that didn't fix what he felt when he looked in the mirror. Even the wins tasted like metal. Lawyers talk about leverage. He felt like he was paying to argue with himself. Numbers nobody applauds started deciding his fate. Day rates for insurance, clauses about punctuality, penalties for overages. Hard to insure is a phrase that closes doors softly. Let's circle back is a sentence that means goodbye. Scripts still came, but they arrived with a question mark he hadn't seen before. Can we rely on him? He tried to pull the handbrake, swore off, then swore again. Good stretches tempted him into thinking the worst was over. Good stretches make bad days feel impossible until they aren't. He learned a cruel truth. The hardest opponent is the day after a good day, when you think you're cured and the habit reminds you you're not. The body kept its end of the bargain longer than it should have. He could still leap, still kick, still hit a frame like punctuation. The life around it went off key. Friendships thinned to acquaintances. Rooms that once warmed at his entrance went neutral. Silence returned, not the hungry kind from the car seat years, but the kind that arrives when you've had everything and can't feel any of it. He'd built a career on control, hips, breath, timing. Now he had to learn a harder version of the same lesson. Control isn't willpower, it's structure. Structure is what you return to when your feelings are lying. That realization didn't strike like a montage. It arrived drip by drip through missed birthdays, postponed calls, and mornings where the mirror waited longer than it should. He could name every muscle that fired in a perfect roundhouse. He now had to name the pattern that kept firing when he didn't want it to. Fame had given him an audience for the best of him and a microphone for the worst. To keep the first and disarm the second, he would have to do something he'd never been asked to do on screen. Be accountable without applause. When momentum slides, the first thing that shows it isn't the box office. It's the paperwork. Deals that once fit on a page arrived as binders. Every clause felt like a test he had already failed in someone else's eyes. A script quarrel here. A producer demand there. None of it glamorous, all of it tiring. Even when he walked away with the decision, the whisper that lingered in town was the same. Complicated. Then came the kind of case that doesn't leave with the verdict. A stunt went wrong. Someone's life changed. Money moved because that's what courts can move. The rest, the weight in his chest when he looked back at the call sheet, stayed. He could measure distance, angle, timing down to the breath. This was a miss no precision could erase. Settled is a legal word, not a moral one. The offset snapshots kept feeding a narrative with no interest in nuance. A grainy photo outside a club, a name dropped into a caption, a story retold by people who weren't there. Truth travels, rumor sprints. Meanwhile, the one currency he needed, reliability, spent down with each repetition. Producers don't bet on redemption arcs. They bet on schedules. Then the 3 letters that flatten reputations, DUI. Mugshot lighting is indifferent. It doesn't care about splits, box office, or the poster over a teenager's bed. It presents you without context and lets the world supply the rest. For a man framed by cameras his entire adult life, this frame was the most unforgiving. Fatigue, denial, consequence. Studios do math the public never sees. Bond rates, completion guarantees, penalty ladders. Headlines don't just bruise feelings, they raise numbers. Hard to ensure began to slip into emails. Circle back started to mean don't. Calls still came, smaller and slower, like a faucet someone forgot to turn off all the way. He could feel the draft where the work used to be. Friends with nothing to sell and nothing to gain began to speak plainly. Not with ultimatums, those rarely stick, but with repetition. You need help, you need rest, you need quiet. He'd built a life on pushing through. This wasn't a push-through problem. This was a stop and rebuild one. So he took inventory the way he understood, with honesty and a plan. Trophies are proof, they are not protection. Cash flow can weather a dry quarter, a name can't weather many more noisy weeks. The solution wasn't a speech, a promise, or a headline reversal. It was structure. And structure had saved him before. Early alarms, clean food, breath before blast. He began showing up to the only contest that mattered now, 8 a.m. against himself. No audience, no trailer, no excuses. Stretch until the hips stop arguing. Eat like tomorrow depends on it. Breathe until the pulse stops lying. Repeat. Not for a role. For a life that had to be, again, more durable than the story told about it. Courts can close a file, papers can be signed, the town can move on to a louder rumor. Trust doesn't move on command. It returns by inches. It returns when the person who said, "I'll be there," is there. Every time, without drama. The man who once convinced cameras he was inevitable now had to convince rooms he was simply dependable. Public wins don't automatically translate into a peaceful house. In his case, louder premieres often meant quieter dinners. Love needs time. Success kept billing him in hours he didn't have. The timeline reads like a series of honest attempts under impossible conditions. Maria Rodriguez was the first promise. Young, earnest, colliding head-on with distance and a dream that required him to leave more than he could bring. Cynthia Derderian arrived in the scramble years. Comfort and lift during a climb that rewarded motion and punished stillness. It flickered fast, a reminder that affection can't outpace a schedule forever. With Gladys Portuguese, the frame widened into a family. Christopher and Bianca turned a house into a stake in the ground. For a stretch, the balance held, training in the morning, set in the afternoon, quiet at night. But velocity erodes margins. Missed flights became missed moments. Apologies stacked up like boarding passes. Trust phrased slowly at first, then obviously. The separation hurt because it disproved the idea that you can be everywhere and still be present where it matters. He tried again with Darcy Lapierre. Nicholas arrived, and with him a new vow to steady the pace. Intent was there, infrastructure wasn't. Headlines, travel, and the old math of overcommitment pressed until the center cracked. Nothing about that reads as villainy. It reads as a man whose professional discipline hadn't yet migrated fully into his personal life. What followed wasn't a montage, it was repair work. He circled back to Gladys, not for a tidy story, but for a difficult one. Boundaries renegotiated, routines rebuilt, attention paid on time. Paper almost ended it again years later. They chose otherwise. That choice didn't fix history. It set a new policy. Fewer promises, more proof. The parental ledger changed too. He shifted from make it up later to make it count now. Calls returned when they came, not when convenient. Travel planned around birthdays instead of the other way round. Being physically in the room without mentally scrolling somewhere else. The wins were small and daily. 8 p.m. at the table, school event sightings without a camera crew, texts answered before midnight. Each child pulled a different lesson out of him. With Christopher, steadiness over spectacle. Show up the same way, not the loud way. With Bianca, respect for her own path and craft without hovering. Support that doesn't turn into a spotlight. With Nicholas, patience that doesn't perform. A long game measured in presence, not posts. None of that erases earlier absences. It acknowledges them and declines to repeat them. The public keeps score with headlines. Families keep score with habits. He relearned the discipline that built his career and applied it at home. Routine over rush, listening over speeches, boundaries over grand gestures. The old formula, stance before speed, breath before blast, works at a dinner table too. Stand the right way, prioritize, breathe, slow the room, then move, respond, don't react. The trophies didn't change, the metric did. A good day used to be measured in dailies and box office. Now it looked like a morning stretch done on time and being where you said you'd be when evening arrived. No PR flourish, no perfect arc. Just repairs that hold because they're repeated. The loudest chaos wasn't on set. It was the whiplash inside his own head. High gears that ran for days, ideas stacking faster than sleep could catch them. Then the drop, a weight so heavy even getting upright felt like work. For years, he called it pressure, schedule, life. A doctor finally called it by its name, bipolar. A label didn't fix it, but it gave him a map. Instead of trying to out-tough the swings, he learned to manage them. Medication to sand down the spikes. Therapy to sort the knots he dragged from one decade to the next. Most of all, a return to the architecture that had once saved him. Routine over mood, structure over willpower. Mornings stopped being a negotiation. He treated them like call time. Stretch until the hips stop arguing. Breath work until the pulse tells the truth. Light strength to wake the joints without cashing the day's energy. Food on schedule. Nothing dramatic, just clean inputs that don't light fires he has to put out later. Water, walks, silence that isn't empty but steady. He learned triggers by pattern, not by pride. Too many flights, fewer yeses. Too much applause, more quiet. Rest before the crash, not after. He stopped treating good days like proof he was cured and started treating them like a balance you protect. Momentum became something to pace, not something to outrun. Relapses weren't headlines, they were lessons recorded without excuses. When the old shortcuts whispered, he answered with logistics. Earlier nights, fewer rooms, closer friends. The same way a roundhouse flows, from stance to hip to heel, his life began to flow from calendar to boundary to behavior. The technique was the therapy. Talking about it publicly surprised people who still wanted the myth. He didn't trade confession for attention. He traded myth for usefulness. If the guy on your poster can say out loud that he needs help and a plan, maybe your own plan doesn't sound like weakness. Strength wasn't the absence of a storm. It was knowing where your anchors are and checking them before it rains. Work followed the repair, not the other way around. He wasn't chasing 20-hour days anymore. He was choosing the projects that fit a life he could maintain. Smaller sets where focus mattered more than frenzy. Roles that let craft breathe, not just muscles flex. The body stayed impressive. The pace got smarter. At home, the same blueprint held. Fewer promises, more proof. Show up when you said, even if nobody is filming it. Answer the message now, not after the gym. Protect the routines that protect you. The people who mattered didn't need speeches. They needed the same man on Tuesday that they saw on Monday. He used to define control as pushing harder than anyone else. Now it meant returning to sleep, to meals, to movement, to the next right appointment. Not dramatic, not viral, not even interesting to anyone outside the room, but durable. And durability, he learned, is what turns a comeback into a life. The turn didn't arrive with fireworks, it arrived with a confession. In JCVD, he stopped performing invincibility and let the lens see the person carrying it. The voice softened. The eyes didn't blink their way out of pain. For 6 minutes, he told the truth without a shield. Critics reset their expectations. Fans did too. Suddenly, the question wasn't whether he could still kick, it was what else he could do. He chose projects like Someone Protecting a Pulse, Universal Soldier, Regeneration and Day of Reckoning stripped the gloss and kept the grit. Fewer quips, more consequence. The fights read as heavy, not busy. Then he stepped into pure menace in an ensemble built to celebrate muscle memory. As the villain, he didn't shout, he aimed. Calm cruelty, timing like a metronome. Audiences remembered why a sharp antagonist is half the show, and then a single image reintroduced him to the planet. The split between two moving trucks. No panic in the face, no wasted gesture, just balance riding motion like a tide. It was an ad, yes. It was also a statement. Pressure is loud, mastery is quiet. The clip traveled farther than any poster ever did and turned a stunt into a philosophy. Hold center while the world moves. Culture started echoing him without needing the old VHS tapes. Game characters wore his posture. Memes borrowed the calm. A younger crowd met him as a reference, not a relic. He wasn't chasing relevance. Relevance kept pointing back to him. He showed he could laugh at his own legend without torching it. Jean-Claude Van Damme winked at the mythology and still respected the work. The joke landed because the craft did. Even voice gigs and cameos carried the same signature. Clarity over noise, timing over volume. He didn't need to be the biggest presence in a frame, he needed to be the sharpest. Behind the camera, the habits matched the image. Mornings belonged to movement and breath. Food served the day, not the mood. Travel with buffers, schedules with margins. Colleagues described him with the most valuable word at this stage. Reliable. Show up, be prepared, be kind, leave the day cleaner than you found it. He let the brand mature, less velocity, more veracity, less insistence, more intent, action that admits gravity, characters who bleed without melodrama. The audience, older now, met him in that lane and stayed. He wasn't trying to be who he was at 30. He was showing what control looks like at 60. The split stopped being a trick and settled into meaning. It's not about flexibility, it's about poise. Knees soft, hips steady, eyes quiet, while the platforms under you roll in opposite directions. That image explains the reinvention better than any interview. Life moves, you balance. Calm, exact, unshaken, long enough for the next true step. He curates the day like a set. Mornings belong to maintenance, long hip openers, breath ladders, slow, eccentric work for knees and back. The split is a systems check. Range, control, calm. If it wobbles, he adjusts the schedule, not the standard. Work is intentional. Fewer pyrotechnics, more precision. Scenes that let silence carry meaning. Fighting that respects weight and recovery. He isn't chasing the version of himself on an old poster. He's refining the one who can still hit exact beats without rushing the truth between them. Professional is the brand, on time, camera ready, notes absorbed without theater. He protects the day, fewer takes wasted, crew out on schedule, no chaos gifted to tomorrow. Younger castmates don't get lectures. They get a live demo of repeatable basics, warm early, hydrate, hit, reset. It travels better than advice. Offset presence is the metric. Home has non-negotiables. 8 p.m. at the table, birthdays ring-fenced, callbacks same day. Later is retired. He budgets energy the way he once budgeted calories. Enough for the scene that matters most. Fame is a tool. He lends his name to rooms that need a door opened, fundraisers, community gyms, small film crews asking for a morale bump. He keeps the cameos brief and the intent clear. Help, then leave space. No hostage taking of the spotlight. He treats social appearances like training volume. One meaningful post beats a flood. Behind-the-scenes clips show craft, not chaos. He lets the algorithm chase him. He doesn't chase it back. Aging isn't an enemy, it's a constraint he trains around. Recovery windows are longer. Warm-ups are smarter. He cycles intensity. Mobility is non-negotiable. Diet is simple and boring on purpose. Sleep gets the same respect a director once did. He lives by a simple order now. Set your stance before you sprint, steady the breath before the blast, keep the routine when the mood wobbles, and let proof speak louder than promises. Be where you said you'd be. Fans aged with him. They don't need invincible, they want honest. The kick reel still plays, but the 6 unarmored minutes matter just as much now. That moment didn't kill the myth. It put a spine in the man behind it. Legacy is transfer. If a kid in a small gym learns to warm up properly because of him, that counts. If an actor trades machismo for punctuality after a week on the same call sheet, that counts. If someone hears, manage the swing, and finally asks for help, that counts twice. He used to prove he could take a hit. Now he proves he can carry a life, noise, praise, regret, and stay upright. Not by being louder, but by returning. To sleep, to food, to movement, to the next right appointment. Durability over drama. The ascent was a frame-perfect kick. The rest is a choice, repeated daily. Hold center, move with intent, leave the day cleaner than you found it. Legends fade when they chase volume, they last when they choose balance. In the end, the legend wasn't the split. It was the man who learned to hold still while everything around him moved. He rose fast, he fell hard, and he rebuilt slower than headlines travel. One morning at a time, one honest day, stacked on the next, not invincible, durable, not the loudest in the room. The most precise. That's the arc. Discipline found, discipline lost, discipline returned, and the balance that finally outlasted the noise. If this story hit you the way those old kicks did, stick with us. Tap subscribe, hit the notification bell, and tell me below. Which moment changed how you see Jean-Claude? The airborne kick that made you rewind, or the 6 minutes where he stood still and told the truth? Either way, hold your center. I'll see you in the next one.